A pale full moon pushes through ragged clouds. Below, a crumbling stone chapel leans into darkness. Its spire cuts the sky like a broken fang. Shadows stretch long across moss-choked graves. Inside the chapel, villagers huddle behind warped shutters. Faces pale, eyes wide, a candle flickers on a wooden altar then sputters, overpowered by the encroaching silver light. Midnight wind stirs dry leaves. Wood groans. Somewhere in the forest, a wolf howls low, guttural, and long. Imagine a silver disk rising in the sky, illuminating every thorn and shadow yet bringing terror to hearts bound by superstition. They called it the wolf's eye, an omen of madness, plague, and death. The moon reflects in a still water basin. A villager grips a wooden cross. An old woman mutters a prayer beneath her breath. The metallic chill of moonlight brushes bare skin. The smell of tallow smoke hangs in the air. Silence tightens like a noose before the scream. Tonight, we unveil the dark enchantment, primal fear of the full moon in medieval minds. A rutted dirt road glistens under the cold light of a full moon. Puddles mirror the silver disk overhead. Frost crusts the grass. Elfric, the woodcutter, approaches a sagging barn, his lantern swaying, its glow flickering across the mud and crooked fence posts. Each of his breaths blooms white in the air. His boots squelch with every careful step. At the door he halts. His knuckles grip the wood, white with dread. Inside, the animals are in chaos: sheep bleating, hooves pounding the straw, pigs squealing with terror. Their eyes roll in the moonlight spilling through the wall slats. Shadows twist and crawl across the timber walls like restless spirits. He mutters a prayer under his breath, signs the cross, then pulls a linen pouch from beneath his cloak. Mugwort. He casts the bitter herb into the troughs. Its smoke rises faintly, curling with intent. The animals begin to settle. The panic drains, leaving wary quiet. The barn door crashes open behind him. Brother Edwin, cloaked in wool and bearing a sprig of rue, steps in with purpose. In one hand he grips a psalter. In the other, the herb shakes in time with his voice. He begins to chant some words, echo off beams. The effect is immediate. The last squeal fades. Sheep nuzzle their straw, and silence fills the barn. Elfric lowers his lantern. Relief catches in his chest. Then, slowly, he turns his head toward the doorway. Beyond, the moon hangs low and enormous. A shadow crosses it, a silhouette moving silently through the graveyard. Between moss-covered stones, a lupin shape slips, unhurried, unseen but undeniable. A church bell tolls in the distance. 1, 2, 3, the witching hour. Inside, Brother Edwin's voice continues, low and steady. May God shield us till dawn. Tonight, anxiety over a full moon might mean restlessness or crowded beaches. But for medieval villagers, lunar nights brought real peril. Madness, miscarriages, and the belief that plague and possession were unleashed by its silver glare. A modern skyline under a glowing moon hums with life. Joggers trace neon-lit paths along the waterfront. Music spills from rooftop bars. Street lights flicker beside slow-moving traffic. A silver orb hangs above it, all majestic, benign. To us, the full moon is nature's inhaler moment of beauty, framed by nightlife, reflection, and rhythm. Cut now to a 12th century hamlet. Stone cottages line a muddy road. The moon rises above the thatched rooftops. Windows slam shut. Families extinguish hearths, huddle close, and murmur prayers. A village watchman passes slowly, lantern held high, eyes scanning the darkness. In their world, moonlight was not romance, it was risk. Torches guarded thresholds. Doors were bolted against things they couldn't name. only feel. Inside a modern hospital, fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow. A nurse notes moon phase agitation on a clipboard. A patient paces, sleepless. Screens blink with heart rates and sleep metrics. Cut to a medieval sick ward. Wooden cots stuffed with straw, patients moaning. A healer walks through with a sachet of mugwort, muttering charms. Garlic cloves rest on foreheads. Rue and salt circle the room's edge. Today's science examines serotonin and circadian disruption. In their time, moon madness was taken literally. The word lunatic wasn't metaphor, it was diagnosis. A child in a modern nursery stares in wonder at the moon through her window, tracing its shape with her finger. Cut to a young medieval girl trembling beneath a wool blanket. Her grandmother tying a red thread around her wristward against the wolf's eye. We see the full moon as beautiful an invitation to wonder. They saw it as an omen, a silver trial for the mind, a portal through which fear slipped. Back then, moonlight meant danger. Children wailing, cows miscarrying, neighbors howling. Houses became bunkers. Fear was made tangible in smoke, herb, prayer. Now, we fear burnout, in boxes and headlines. But the same pattern persists. We anchor fear in symbols, and few shown more terrifying than the full moon. Understanding their dread helps us trace our own next. How medieval minds fought back, rituals, remedies, and myths forged beneath the wolf's eye. The medieval world regarded the moon not just as a celestial body, but as a force that governed health, behavior, and even fate. Physicians believed the moon's cycles thickened the body's humors, influencing blood, bile, and phlegm. Surgeons avoided operating during a full moon, fearing uncontrollable bleeding. Midwives timed births around the lunar phases, warning that children born under its glare might be cursed with fevers or madness. To them, the full moon wasn't poetry, it was prognosis. Charts linking lunar calendars to bodily afflictions were copied and consulted as often as scripture. It didn't stop at medicine. Legal systems reflected this moon-born dread. On full moon nights, courts enacted lunacy clauses, restrictions on travel, commerce, and even how prisoners were chained. Villagers locked their doors early, and those caught wandering risked arrest or suspicion of witchcraft. Witch trials spiked during full moons, when hysteria and superstition crested together. Testimonies often included references to how the accused howled under the moon or changed with its rising. Inside homes, people turned to ritual for protection. Sprigs of rue and garlands of heuchera were hung over windows and tied to infants' cradles to ward off moon-sent illness. Processions marched through towns with holy banners raised to block lunar rays. Priests led moonrise masses, and Marian hymns filled the air not just for reverence, but as warding against perceived celestial harm. Amulets etched with crescent runes dangled from necks and rafters. Magic, religion, and medicine braided together under the wolf's eye. In the moon's glow, all boundaries blurred. What we now call science, law, and spirituality were inseparable in medieval life. Their fears were logical in a world with little explanation and much vulnerability. The moon was there, constant, and its light, a harbinger of both mystery and menace. Join us now as we follow moonlight through these layered worlds. Historians will decode the charts, anthropologists will trace the cures, and folklorists will resurrect the chants. What emerges is not merely a tale of superstition, but a survival story. One where the moon was both threat and guide, madness and meaning. Let its light show us what they sand, what still echoes in the dark. A parchment unfurls, revealing a lunar chart inked with spidery notes, bloodletting days circled in red. symbols aligning the full moon with surgical avoidance. In scriptoriums, monks annotated patient ledgers beside glyphs of crescents and orbs. They believed the moon governed the body's tides, that full moons thickened the blood, turning minor incisions into rivers. Physicians postponed surgeries when the lunar eye was at its fullest, terrified of uncontrollable bleeding. Even planting crops and burying the dead was timed by this silver cycle. Hundreds of years later, in a lab bathed in sterile light, a spectrometer passes the ultraviolet register of moonlight, but finds no spike strong enough to justify the dread. Still, their logic persists like a ghost beneath modern code. Moon phases shaped medical rhythms, observes Dr. Lena Valtonen, but with more ritual than science. The parchment darkens with age. Still visible, a blood-red circle over a full moon and beneath it, a name crossed out. The ledger of the dead grew thicker each full moon. In towns scarred by plague, panic rose with each lunar cycle. Priests blamed the silver orb, saying its glow awakened demons and thickened miasma. People shut windows, burned rue, and washed thresholds with vinegar. Patients believed the light itself could enter the bloodstream and stir death. Healers scrawled moon symbols next to fever diagnoses, and public health decrees adjusted in rhythm with the lunar calendar. But the moon bore no real plague, only misplaced fear. They delayed treatment, waiting for phases to pass, explains Professor Marcus Reynolds. They fought disease with timing, not understanding. In one account, bells tolled for the dying under a full moon, while herbalists filled streets with smoke and song. The real culprit, Flibberton rat, slipped beneath notice. Yet the moon remained the scapegoat, hovering above silent chapels, a silver spectre accepted as fate. A midwife stops at the threshold of a birthing house, the moon bright above. She shakes her head. Tonight, the child must wait. Full moons were feared in childbirth moments when minds and wombs were said to turn. Pennyroyal and motherwort tinctures lined her satchel, but she wouldn't use them until the moon waned. Instead, she lit candles in all four corners, murmured a protective chant, and stepped into the cold to wait for safer skies. Mothers whispered of babes born, screaming under full moons, of fevers that struck before first breath. They tied lunar tides to womb tides, says Dr. Helena Grant, and though the science faltered, the consequences were real. In darkness, some infants arrived alone, midwives refusing the risk. Moonlight spilled across blankets. The mother clutched her belly and prayed for dawn. Wolves howled from frescoed chapel walls, their eyes glowing beneath painted moons. In village whispers, full moons unlocked the beast within man. Werewolves weren't fairy tales, they were warnings. Stories spread of men twisting into predators, of graveyards where corpses stirred under midsummer moons. Parishioners avoided cemeteries on such nights, lest revenants, her-frotted walkers rise again. A priest's sermon from 1362 blamed the moon for stirring the wolf in man. In Munich, locals exhumed the dead to check for bite marks or sunken eyes. They feared change. Notes Professor Marcus Felton, and the moon was the universe's most visible changemaker. Fog crept through graveyards as villagers left offerings. Garlic, rue, even coins placed on lips. In their minds, the moon didn't just light the dark, it opened its door. In stone chambers, monks bent over competers' tables tracing the date of Easter by moon's cycle. The full moon after the spring equinox governed liturgy, fasting, and celebration. Time itself bent to its glow. Monastic orders arranged labor, silence, and penance in rhythm with lunar math. In the village below, Candlemas rites unfolded beneath crescent skies. Banners lifted, candles lit, chants echoing off wet cobblestone. Illness, they believed, travelled on moonlight, so blessings, timed to its cycle, were acts of both devotion and defence. It was calendar and compass, says Dr. Ingrid Folk, faith tuned to a waxing clock in the heavens. Cloister bells rang not by hour, but by phase. Their religion, like their medicine, bowed to the silver eye above. Silver gleamed above cradles, where sleeping infants clutched wool-wrapped amulets. Mothers carved crescent runes into wax tablets and pinned them above doorways. Moon-shaped pendants hung over 6 beads, dipped in consecrated oil. These weren't jewelry, they were spells. Each object carried belief that silver could absorb illness, that rune marks could redirect the moon's fury. In one home, a charm passed through generations, bore 10 notches, one for each plague survived. These were material prayers, explains Professor Leif Gunnarsson. You didn't speak to the divine, you wore it. Beneath the full moon, villagers circled homes with salt, rang bells, or lit bone incense. They believed the wolf's eye watched, but with enough protection, it might blink. Modern labs track UV emissions across lunar cycles, their data. Moonlight holds no direct threat to health. But centuries ago, under that same light, healers burned dung, rosemary, and rue in homes thick with fever. They timed purges to waning moons and refused to bury the dead until a new phase began. They had pattern but not proof, says Dr. Sigrid Thamson. Correlation became cause. Scientific gaps were filled with doctrine and smoke. Mugwort leaves steeped in lard were placed on tongues. Vinegar cloths tied to wrists. These rituals weren't magic, they were necessity born from absence. The moon lit their nights, and lacking microbes or microscopes, they filled the dark with hope disguised as cure. A monk's quill finishes a line in a leather-bound plague ledger. 10 dead, night of the full moon. Next to the tally, a small crescent, inked in careful strokes. The moon was more than a calendar, it was a character in their history. From medicine to myth, from childbirth to law, it shaped the rhythms of medieval life. Today, lunar eclipses are streamed online, their symbolism reduced to aesthetic, yet the fear it once inspired lingers, even if only in shadow. Moonlight offered metaphor, reflects Dr. Valtonen, but for them, metaphor governed flesh. The past doesn't vanish, it echoes. As the eclipse ends and the silver light returns, a sword-shaped shadow cuts across an ancient page. The wolf's eye opens once more. As twilight deepens over the village green, children scatter across the grass chasing fireflies that glow like tiny spirits. Behind them, the moon begins to rise silent and commanding. Edith the healer moves from house to house, collecting moonwort and mullein, her fingers deftly binding them into bundles hung above doorways. Thomas the miller walks the path to the mill, where he halts the grinding wheels precisely at moonrise. Grain dust hangs in the cold air. The grinding of flour is personal. One dares to challenge what stirs under the silver light. Candles flicker to life behind shuttered windows. Herbal pouches are clutched tightly. Breath fogs the air as villagers seal themselves in, girded by plant, flame, and silence. On the second night, Marta, the midwife, arranges 9 beeswax candles into a crescent above the birthing bench. She kneels to whisper a prayer to Saint Mary, her voice low and sure. Expectant mothers lie still, afraid to call for the birth tub. The moon's peak is believed to stir the womb into wildness. Marta's tinctures of pennyroyal and mugwort rest untouched on the shelf, safe only to use under a new moon. In the dim chamber, breath and hope hang in delicate balance. Midweek brings plague fear. Brother Anselm treads the village by lantern light, his cloak brushing frozen grass. He kneels at each marked door, drawing an ash cross with trembling fingers and sprinkling holy water onto the lintels. Inside, the sick shiver under straw blankets, some thrashing, others murmuring to the night sky. Villagers claim the moon awakens what festers, turning sickness into frenzy. On stone floors, moonlight puddles like an omen. The fourth night, Wolf's Eve, arrives with unease. The hounds refuse silence, howling toward the ridge. Shepherds tie salt ropes across sheep enclosures and weave verbena into the gates. The moon hangs low, the air crackling. Before dawn, a young man disappears. Some say he was drawn into the forest by the moon itself. No one says his name aloud. As the moon begins to dip westward on the fifth night, villagers gather in the churchyard beneath shadowed gravestones. The priest walks among them with a brimming vessel, casting holy water over each stone. His murmured prayers rise with breath into the cold air. At the granary, Edith casts a circle of barley and nettle around the outer walls, invoking protection. Each act speaks of belief, of holding darkness at bay. Night 6 brings the rites of renewal. At midnight, ovens fire within stone hearths as barley bread rises under waning light. Fresh loaves are wrapped in cloth and left at crossroads, small offerings to wandering spirits. At first dawn, Thomas swings open the granary doors. Villagers arrive, one by one, accepting rations measured carefully. Marta offers porridge to the weakest, an act of mercy sealed in silence. The seventh night fades into first light. As the final edge of moonlight slips below the trees, bells toll from the chapel. 1, 2, 3, a rhythm of release. Edith reclaims the dried herbs from her doorways and begins to boil them into tonic. The villagers exhale together. Another cycle survived. In the longhouse, Edith ladles the bitter infusion of moonwort and mullein into wooden cups. Each sip is taken with solemn gratitude. These are more than tonics, they are memories, distilled into medicine. At the fire's center, she offers a soft invocation to ancestors, asking that the next cycle be gentle. Within the mill, Thomas and the elders unroll hide scrolls, counting the grain stalks with etched runes. What remains is marked, what is missing must be bargained. Salted fish, cords of wood, a carved komol offered in exchange for barley. Words are few. The measure of trust outweighs all, and then a shadow creeps across the moon. A partial eclipse, sudden and terrifying. The village panics. Children cry out. Elders murmur of famine and plague, the dying of the moon. Edith burns the old sachets in her brazier. Thomas lights torches by the well. Anselm recites psalms from the courtyard, his voice cracking through the smoke. Some kneel, some freeze. All watch the sky as if it might fall. Later, as frost sets in, families gather by the hearth. Elders unwrap stories of plague moons, past of disappearances, of narrow escapes. Children sip nettle tea, wide-eyed. Marta sings a lullaby bound in mirth. The moon no longer enemy but old companion. Steam curls like ribbon through the wooden beams. That same night, Thomas and his watchers circle the village's edge. Lanterns swing over frost-cracked paths. They check doors for sachets, warn the curious away from wandering. No one leaves the enclosure not on this night. At last, sunlight breaks the skyline. Mortar creak open. Final rations are given. Edith stoops to accept a sachet from a child. Thomas marks the last grain count with a nod. Anselm lifts the bell rope, and a single tone rings out. Across the frost-hardened earth, villagers smile, quietly, warily, gratefully. They have endured another moon. Not by strength alone, but by trust, ritual, and resilience. Later, As frost sets in, families gather by the hearth. Elders unwrap stories of plague moons, past of disappearances, of narrow escapes. Children sip nettle tea, mild-eyed. Martyr sings a lullaby bound in myth, the moon no longer enemy but old companion. Steam curls like ribbon through the wooden beams. That same night, Thomas and his watchers circle the village's edge. Lanterns swing over frost-cracked paths. They check doors for sachets, warn the curious away from wandering. No one leaves the enclosure not on this night. At last, sunlight breaks the skyline. Mortar creak open. Final rations are given. Edith stoops to accept a sachet from a child. Thomas marks the last grain count with a nod. Anselm lifts the bell rope, and a single tone rings out. Across the frost-hardened earth, villagers smile, quietly, warily, gratefully. They have endured another moon. Not by strength alone, but by trust, ritual, and resilience. In the quiet priory chapel, a fresco gleams, a silver crescent moon poised between angels and demons. A celestial balance of blessing and menace. To medieval minds, the moon was no mere orb, but a fickle mistress, her light capable of warming the soul or freezing the heart. Villagers whispered that her gaze could thaw reason or steel courage, a power both divine and demonic. The sky was a stage where fears and hopes performed their eternal dance beneath that pale curve. The full moon cast long shadows not only in the night but in minds. Lunacy was no poetic term but a grim reality. Medicine prescribed elixirs brewed from wolf's blood, pennyroyal, and rue-potent potions meant to ward off moon madness. Patients were confined in chambers marked with chalked crescents, bound with chains that clinked under the eerie glow. Madness was a possession of the moon's making, shattering minds where science could not yet tread. Full moon nights brought documented bouts of mania that demanded urgent, fearful care. Along the coasts, the moon's power extended to the seas. When tidal bores surged with lunar force, fishermen and villagers believed the moon to be an angry goddess, punishing them with shipwrecks. These were no accidents, but curses enacted by a vengeful cosmic presence. Boats smashed against jagged piers under the watchful glow, nets torn by turbulent waters. The roar of the waves mingled with anxious whispers, a night when the moon ruled water, fate, and fear. In fields far from shore, farmers kept an uneasy calendar. The sowing and reaping of crops bowed to lunar phases, avoiding the full moon to prevent moon rot that could spoil barley and roots. Grain was saved and stored only under the waning moon, while cutting under the waxing phase was forbidden. For them, the moon was law's celestial rhythm, controlling the lifeblood of the harvest. Beneath moonlit furrows, the crunch of dried stalks echoed as silent testimony. Justice, too, was subject to lunar timing. Trials and ordeals were scheduled under the full moon, when truth was believed to shine most brightly. Oaths sworn and confessions made at moonrise carried a binding power that transcended the mortal realm. Judges and elders invoked the wolf's eye to illuminate the soul's secrets, ensuring that verdicts held sway beyond death itself. In council chambers, accused knelt bathed in silver light as the elder raised his staff, a cosmic witness to mortal judgment. The symbolism of the moon wove itself into daily life. Amulets carved with runic crescents hung at cradles. Chants were repeated ninefold at moonrise. Pouches tied with ribbons baked near the hearth. The number 9 resonated with the lunar cycle, sacred days, and not magic. Rituals were both protection and synchronization actions that echoed the heavens above. Hands carved runes into bone and silver, fingers weaving belief into tangible form. The full moon's glow also cast a shadow of collective anxiety. Villages shuttered windows, pets cowered, and cattle balked, as if sensing the night's dread. Curfews were enforced, and hearth rituals repeated twice in vigilance. Fear was shared, a communal pulse tied to the moon's cycle. Stories, warnings, and rites passed down reinforced this emotional contagion, a phobia mapped to the sky. Trust in ritual and each other steadied nerves as darkness stretched. Through it all, the moon was a mirror reflecting mortal fears of contagion, madness, failing crops, and divine wrath. It shaped law, healing, prayer, and daily toil. This was no simple superstition. It was a complex language of survival, where meaning was woven from the uncontrollable night. Fear and resilience existed side by side beneath that ancient silver glow. The moon mapped the ancestors' psyche in patterns written not in ink but in light and shadow. As the fresco fades, villagers raise their eyes to the full moon's curve, timeless watchers of the night sky. In a modern lunar eclipse, that same silver light arcs across the darkness, a whispered echo of centuries-old fears and hopes. The wind sighs softly, and the drumbeat of time continues unbroken beneath the wolf's eye. Beneath the unassuming bathhouse, in a hidden alcove dimly lit by flickering candles, alchemists carefully balance powders of shimmering moonstone. Their hands measure silver-laden minerals with ritual precision. Mixing secret blends whispered to ward off curses borne by the moon's light, these were no simple remedies but tools wielded by those who understood lunar fear as power to control, to tax, and to govern. Across medieval parishes, clerical authorities issued stern decrees forbidding travel, trade, or farming on nights when the moon reached fullness. These edicts, cloaked in the language of divine penance, carried heavy consequences. Fines or mandatory acts of contrition awaited those who disobeyed. The moonlit hours became a night of enforced stillness, fear harnessed by the pulpit to preserve order. Villagers read official proclamations nailed to chapel doors, whispers of Latin chants weaving through the night air as bells tolled warnings at moonrise. Midwives like Marta capitalized on the lunar anxieties swirling through villages. Births under the full moon demanded extra vigilance, more candles, potent herbs, and additional assistants whose labor had to be paid. Thus, moon feasts became a lucrative custom, framing each cry under silver light as both a sacred and profitable event. Candle flames danced in birthing chambers, while coins clinked into crescent-marked jars. The intersection of fear and economy made tangible. Alchemists fueled the market with moonstone powders glittering mica or crushed. Silver shards sold as talismans against lunar curses. These were scattered around cribs or fashioned into amulets worn against the skin. Though recipes varied and efficacy remained dubious, the sales thrived on uncertainty and superstition. The sharp scent of sulphur mingled with the rustle of gold-leaf sachets as candles flickered in shadowed alcoves, the alchemical illusion transforming dread into glittering wealth. Justice, too, was entwined with lunar power. Some villages convened moon courts at night, trials held exclusively under the full moon's glow. It was believed the lunar light coaxed confessions and unveiled guilt, infusing verdicts with divine authority. In torchlit stone chambers, accused individuals knelt beneath silver beams, while magistrates pronounced fate, the solemn atmosphere thick with fear and cosmic judgment. Churches further tapped the moon's power through lunar tithes, payments collected each full moon in grain or coin. These offerings were meant to placate the moon's volatile influence and secure community safety and sanity. Priests lifted baskets heavy with tribute, while villagers queued at dawn, their coins chiming softly amid rhythmic prayers. Sacred economics intertwined with lunar superstition, a silver exchange for celestial favor. In wealthier homes, warding rituals became performances of class and caution. Clerics and midwives were hired to bless amulets, salt hearths, and tie feather charms beneath cradles, all to shield families during lunar peaks. These protections came at a price. The more profound the fear, the deeper the purse. Holy water splashed on silver talismans, feathered charms fluttered by bedside lamps, and coins exchanged hands amid whispered Old Norse chants. The moon also served as a convenient scapegoat for disorder. Authorities blamed moon-induced madness for riots, accidents, and petty thefts, justifying harsh punishments from beatings to exile. In the shadow of lunar chaos, law enforcers found cosmic sanction to impose discipline. Scenes unfolded of youths dragged to stocks under torchlight, their cries mingling with murmurs of onlookers' fear, wielded as a tool of repression. Deep within a monastery vault, a parchment ledger lies open, its columns filled with names and payments marked by crescent symbols. This was the record of moon taxes, birthing fees, and contracts for alchemists, where's proof that lunar superstition was also a system of profit. Monks' hands gently turned fragile pages, while torchlight flickered on stacks of silver coins stamped with crescents. The moon ruled not only the sky, but also the coffers and consciences of those below. Behind prayers and rituals, behind fear and reverence, was a network lunar, dread woven into law, commerce, and control. The silver moon hung in the night sky, but its pull reached deep into every pocket and every soul. Medical studies on the full moon's effect on human behavior offer mixed results. Some emergency rooms report increased admissions during lunar nights, cases of trauma, psychiatric crises, and sleep disturbances. But many statistical analyses find no clear correlation. Yet, in hospital corridors worldwide, the myth persists. Staff share wary glances on full moons, stories circulating about strange nights and spikes in activity. The moon lingers in their collective psyche, a quiet superstition amid scientific debate. Night scenes in an emergency department show nurses checking monitors, the soft beeping blending with footsteps and murmurs of concern, while charts overlay phases of the moon, an invisible influence in a sterile modern setting. Crime data sometimes hints at minor rises during full moons, but causality remains elusive. Media and folklore amplify tales of lunatics and moonstruck offenders, feeding cultural fear more than fact. Police patrols glide through city streets under harsh neon. Grainy CCTV flickers capture late-night shadows. Sirens wail intermittently, radio chatter crackles, and the urban night hums. The full moon's association with chaos is part reality, part myth, reflecting how stories shape perceptions more than hard evidence. Modern cities drown out the moon's subtle rhythms with artificial light. Neon signs, street lamps, and screens disrupt human circadian cycles by suppressing melatonin production. Faces illuminated by smartphone glow show restless eyes. Scrolling fingers and soft electronic beeps mark the nocturnal landscape. We no longer live by lunar cycles but by the pulse of technology, a biological dissonance that modern science seeks to understand. Meanwhile, astrology and wellness culture experience a lunar revival. Moon phase tracking apps and social media influencers promote rituals tied to the lunar calendar, aiming to optimize mood and productivity. Scenes of a young woman lighting a new moon candle, scrolling through astrology charts, are accompanied by calm chanting and flickering candlelight. Ancient lunar lore is repackaged for millennial mindfulness superstition reborn as self-care. Psychologists identify the expectancy effect. Believing the full moon disrupts sleep or behavior can cause stress and insomnia to actually increase during lunar phases. An individual tossing restlessly in bed, eyes fixed on the moonlight filtering through a window, embodies this subtle power of belief. Breath quickens, heartbeats echo, clocks tick. What we expect, the mind often manifests. Experts weigh in. Psychiatrist Dr. Emma Clark explains that belief in lunar influence can shape patients' mood and sleep patterns, for better or worse. Chronobiologist Dr. Navin Patel studies moonlight's faint but measurable effects on melatonin and biological rhythms. Bridging ancient lore with modern science, in labs filled with glowing instruments and brain scans, the echo of old fears intertwines with new knowledge. Our dance with the moon continues, a blend of superstition, science, psychology, and culture. Some myths fade, others endure, shaping how we see ourselves beneath the silver orb. The moon remains a symbol of mystery and change, a silent witness to human hopes and fears, lighting our nights and stories. The camera slowly pans from a sleeping city skyline up to a glowing full moon, reflected perfectly in a still lake. Night sounds fade into a gentle breeze and soft chimes, closing on the reflection of past and present meeting beneath the wolf's eye. The full moon slowly sinks behind distant hills, its silver glow fading gently into the soft, pale gold of dawn. The night's mysteries give way to the first light, but the imprint of moonlight lingers in the quiet earth and sky. They feared the moon's gaze, believing it stirred plagues, madness, and monsters. Yet beneath that fear lay a profound wisdom, an invitation to respect nature's rhythms, to find light within darkness, and to bind community in the face of shared dread. It was a lesson written not just in superstition, but in survival and understanding. As the sun rises, Edith the healer gathers the last sprigs of yarrow, preparing for the next lunar watch. Her hands move with calm purpose, a bridge between old knowledge and new hope. Meanwhile, a modern watcher steps onto a rooftop, eyes lifted to the waning moon. Silent, mindful, aware of the subtle influences that continue to shape lives beneath the same celestial sphere. Perhaps the true lesson is this: our fears often illuminate what we most need to understand ourselves, our inner rhythms, and the vast, mysterious world above. So, next time the full moon rises, don't turn away in fear. Pause, observe its light, and honor the mysteries it still holds, inviting reflection and connection across time. A single candle flickers in the moonlight, then softly extinguishes as dawn breaks, marking the end of night's enchantment and the promise of new knowledge ahead.